Hello, everyone. Welcome into Attacking Third. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's segment, we're going to do a Houston Dash preview. So make sure you leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. We're also on YouTube. Subscribe to us right here at youtube.com/attacking third. Make sure you get all that exclusive NWSL content, previews, recaps, interviews, all right here with A3. The NWSL season is going to kick off on March 25th. You can catch games on Paramount Plus, and we are doing a preview for every single club in the league, a podcast, and on YouTube. So make sure you tell your friends, your family, your cousins, your pets, your neighbors, everybody that you know that the NWSL is making its return. Lisa, we got to chat about Houston Dash. You ready?
I am so ready to talk about this team. I'm excited about this team. Let's go. Bring on the orange.
Dash on, baby. Let's start with an overview of Houston Dash and see what they did in the offseason. They're going to be led by new head coach Sam Laity. It's going to be his first year as a head coach after spending so much time as an assistant with the OL Reign franchise. There's also been some coaching shifts as well. Sarah Loden resigned with a coaching contract in place. So gonna have to see how the staff looks like moving forward with this team after London did a lot of work with Houston. So we'll have to maybe keep an eye on how things get fleshed out there. This team finished number 4. They hosted a playoff game in Houston. They had scenes in Houston around this playoff game. I loved it. I remember when we were talking about the playoff push and we loved how they were marketing this playoff game. It was an exciting time. They made history as a franchise and they finally got to the postseason for the first time in their history, a 10-6-6 record to give them number 4 overall, but they lost unfortunately in that quarterfinal match to Kansas City, a 2-1 loss. And that meant, what were they going to do in the offseason? What was Houston Dash going to do to make sure that they not only try to make their return to the postseason, but go ahead and do better? So we took a look at some of their moves, draft, some of their acquisitions, and we gave them an offseason grade of a B plus. So let's talk a little bit as to why we gave them a B plus, because it includes everything. The offseason includes everything. It includes the coaching hires, it includes the new staff hires, it includes what they did in the draft and who they got, how they navigated free agency. And Houston Dash is one of those teams that made sure they locked up some players out of free agency pretty early on.
Yeah.
In the first ever free agency period. And they did it with re-signings. They wanted to make sure that they got back Sophie Schmidt. They wanted to make sure that they got back Elisa Chapman, 2 Canadian internationals who have been with Houston for a very long time and have really sort of become faces of the franchise in a sense, just because of their tenure with Houston. But they also went out and had an active draft day that maybe didn't necessarily include, a dozen draft picks, although they did make some good selections. But it included the acquisition of Diana Ordonez in a trade with North Carolina Courage. So we're looking at all of these different moves. And for us, I know the Ordonez acquisition is probably the bigger of the moves for this franchise.
Yeah, massive. I mean, I think with our grade of a B plus in this offseason, I think it does start with someone like a Sam Laity, new head coach coming into this team who spent every other season, all 10 years prior with OL Reign as an assistant coach, saw a lot of different coaches there at OL Reign. I mean, mostly with Laura Harvey. And I'd argue Laura Harvey is one of the greatest coaches that we've seen in a very long time in the States. And to be able to learn from her over the last several years, especially the last couple being in OL Reign, this is massive for this Houston side. And I think, honestly, it was almost like a trade-off a little bit. Like, I'm sad that Houston lost Juan Carlos Samaros because I think the turnaround that Amoros did with this Houston team last year at the end of the year was really good, right? He brought them to the playoffs. That first time the club had ever done that, and they lose him to a Gotham team and a Gotham side. This is the next best thing. And Sam Laity, it may even be better because now you're getting someone that's coming in with a bit of a clean slate, had watched this team in Houston from a distance for a number of years, and understood in Sam Laity, as soon as he came in, he knew he wanted to re-sign some of these veterans and some of these staple pieces of his team, which says that he's been watching and he didn't want a clean slate, right? Like signing a Sophie Schmidt, signing an Alicia Chapman, signing a Katie Lind, who's formerly Houghton or Naughton, excuse me, got married in the offseason. I think those are massive. And Ali Prysock really shoring up your defensive end of the field is really big for this offseason of this Houston Dash team as they try to bring in some of these other players. Diana Ordonez, the biggest move that Houston could have made in getting the sophomore player forward, out of North Carolina. That was really the first move that we saw Sam Laity do in acquiring players. Just imagine a Diana Ordonez, an Ebony Salmon, a Maria Sanchez front line for Houston Dash, because that gives me chills, Sandra.
I'm smiling listening to you chat about it. I think, you and I were at the draft, and when that trade went through, when it finally dropped, we were like, man, this is going to be fun. Houston is gonna stay a fun team because they were a fun team to watch last year, with Sanchez and Prince and Ebony Salmon, who came into the mix in the second half of the season. So similar energy. We were just really, really excited to in terms of what this could mean for the Dash moving forward. And that was, in the middle of the draft. So they also made draft picks. They drafted Sophie Hurst out of Harvard at number 20, Jalissa Harris at 22, Lindsey Jennings out of Louisiana State University, and Madeline DeSino from UCLA. So walking away with 4 picks, both maybe all of them could be made an argument for defensive minded, but midfield and 3 defenders, I think, if you're looking for like actual positioning. But in terms of maybe the losses, for this team, like, we're very excited for the additions, whether it was an Ordonez or even a Courtney Peterson that they engaged in with a later trade in the offseason with Orlando Pride, or making the signing of Barbara Oliveri from Liga MX Femenil. And this trend of like trying to make sure that they get local players kind of back in the mix, Olivieri is someone from Kent, I believe. Ordonez is really excited to be back home. I mean, that was part of the push for a trade to try to return to her hometown and home state and be able to play in front of family and friends. Making the acquisition for Havana Salon, getting some more midfield depth for this team, because there might be some players missing during the World Cup. We've been talking about that in all of the previews, but it's not just going to be that World Cup stretch that they have to deal with. I mean, they're going to deal with having lost some players out of preseason and out of the offseason. They've already waived Julia Ashley and their defensive line. They waived Brie Vasali, who is now playing overseas with Brighton and Hove. Lindsay Harris no longer with the team. Midfielder Tierney Wiltshire is no longer with the team. But the biggest, I think, for these losses, we're looking at the absence of Nichelle Prince. She's listed on the roster, but is out with a season-ending injury. Had torn her ACL, unfortunately, while on duty with Canada towards the latter stages of 2022. So I think that's probably the biggest loss, right? And I think they knew that going into their offseason. They knew that going into the draft. So making a move for Diana Ordonez, I think, it's a little bit, you got like 2 different players across the top line, and an Ordonez who could play more centrally versus a Prince who typically had responsibilities out wide. But I think when you've got, a Salmon, a Sanchez to sort of look at and sort of build that top line,
Ordonez,
and then you have an Ordonez now to slot into the front 3, I think they might not miss a step in their attack. But Nichelle Prince is still a huge loss for this.
I mean, I agree. I don't think they're gonna they still have players to be able to play in that front line, but you miss that extra piece with Nichelle Prince. I mean,
Yeah.
she is just so crucial, and she has been for this team in the front line. I mean, she's one of those players that can, what you're going to get from her day in and day out. So that's really what they're missing. Now, there are other players that can step up, and right, it always provides more opportunities for other players to get more times, but that's a really big loss in Nichelle Prince. Now, she'll still be around the team, most likely doing rehab with the Houston training stash and be there, but it's still pretty difficult to not have her as a weapon to go to for Sam Laity throughout this year. But I think when you look at the gains and the losses for this team specifically that they've done, I think B+ is the grade we gave them. That's pretty honest. Because of some of the losses, right? I mean, you look at goalkeeper Lindsay Harris as well, no longer on this roster. I think that's a change in the locker room for this team that they're going to have to see and have to deal with a little bit, not necessarily in terms of on the pitch. I mean, we saw Jane Campbell run away with this team last year, and over the last couple of years, she's been the mainstay in goal. So it does help to add some of those new pieces in. But I think Havana Salone is a nice add-on from North Carolina as well in this mix. They've got good pieces. They definitely added some depth as well in getting a defender in Courtney Peterson. I mean, I think Havana Salone is also going to add a little bit of depth in that midfield. And then all of the draft picks that Houston came out of the draft with. I'm excited about that. Jalissa Harris, that's a big get out of South Carolina, a defender that can also add depth. I think that's where you really have to look at, because now they've got a lot of defenders on this roster and a lot of defenders that have been there consistently. And I know we're going to talk about that, but I think when you lose so many different players when you gain so many players in your attacking end, you sometimes just get so excited about that, but you don't realize that you're going to have X amount of players sitting on the bench on the defensive end, and who's going to rotate in for those forwards up top, because we usually don't see that much rotation on the defensive side of things.
Well, let's have a little fun with it. We're going to talk about the roster, the preseason roster for Houston Dash, and take a look at maybe some players that we haven't chatted about in the course of this offseason overview. So make sure you stick with us right after a quick break.
Welcome to the UEFA Europa League on Paramount Plus.
What a night!
Your home for more ultra-competitive, world-class soccer, where Europe's elite and soccer's Cinderellas pump out that one-of-a-kind white-knuckle excitement that grows with every cut, every cross, and each and every goal! The UEFA Europa League. Stream every match live exclusively on Paramount Plus.
All right, let's chat a little bit about Houston's preseason roster in a glance. 5 goalkeepers. Wow. To start off preseason, Grace Barber, Jane Campbell, Ella Diedrich, Devin Kerr, and Savannah Madden. Diedrich, season-ending injury, but still listed. We talked a little bit about the departure of Lindsay Harris. Devin Kerr, question mark, possibly going to fulfill that role. They went out and acquired her in the offseason as well, Washington Spirit. Defenders. Initially listed with 13. Once upon a time, Julia Ashley was included in that bunch, but Alyssa Chapman, Chai Cortez, Anika Creel, Haley Davidson, Madeline DeSino, Caprice Didasco, Brianna Halverson, Jalissa Harris, Natalie Jacobs, Lindsay Jennings, Katie Lynn, formerly Naughton, and Allie Prysock. Double-digit defenders. We've got double-digit midfielders as well. Hope Breslin, Amy Curran.
Players.
Yeah, a lot of players. Wasila Dewura Sola, Elizabeth Eddy, Shea Groom, Makame Gomera Stevens, Kelsey Hedge, Sophie Hurst, Libby Moore, Sophie Schmidt, Havana Salon, Mercer Vigiano, and double-digit forwards as well. So we've got Michaela Obam, Michelle Aloze, Jolie Anderson, Ryan Graris, Paulina Gramaglia, who's currently on loan. We'll chat a little bit about that. Daniela Murguia, Diana Ordonez, Michelle Prince, Ebony Salmon, Maria Sanchez, and Cameron Tucker as well. So there's some names out here that we hadn't gotten an opportunity to chat about in terms of our offseason overview of this team. And as we're previewing them, I'm wondering where some of these players are going to fit. There's a lot of non-roster invitees on this one. There's your 4 draft picks as well. Some season-ending injuries sprinkled throughout this preseason roster, and double-digit numbers for defenders position, midfielders, forwards. obviously this team is going to whittle some things down come
Yeah.
opening day.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say, "Hey, there's some players you didn't get a chance to talk about." Yeah, we're only here for 45 minutes
I
because
know.
there's just a lot on this
Yeah.
roster. I mean, it's hefty. It's a lot of really tough decisions, I'm gonna say, for a coach like Sam Laity to look at this list. But I think defenders is an issue that not an issue, but they've gotta shore up some of that
Yeah.
space in that back line, right? I mean, you've got someone like an Alicia Chapman, Caprice Didasco, Katie Lind, Ali Prysock. Those are your 4 starters at this point. And then you add in a couple different draft picks, right? Madeline, Jalissa Harris. I think that Natalie Jacobs is also one that we could see across that back line. There's a lot of different moving parts that Sam Laity has to deal with in terms of what kind of formation they're going to play and how Houston is going to be able to be consistent enough defensively that they can allow for a little bit of movement with your internationals coming in and out with the injuries that have been faced with this team. I think also the midfield is tight with 12 of them. I mean, it's tight. There's not a lot of wiggle room on this roster. If you
Yeah.
need to make an impact immediately during preseason and solidify your spot in this starting lineup just to kind of see how it goes. Now, we don't know specifically how Sam Laity is going to be as a head coach, right? Because he's been an assistant for so long and he's been an assistant under Laura Harvey. So perhaps we kind of go off of that and say, okay, Sam Laity is going to be a similar coach like a Laura Harvey. This is a big roster for a coach like that to not be able to rotate a lot of different players in. Pretty consistent with the starting lineup is someone like Laura Harvey. And if that translates to Sam Laity, this is going to be really difficult. I mean, but I'm most excited about this forward group. Michaela Abam, Michelle Alozi, Joelle Anderson. We saw time from this player last year. Ryan Garris also saw time from this player last year. Paulina, the Argentina international, Diana Ordonez, Ebony Salmon, Maria Sanchez. Like, this excites me. This front line is definitely exciting.
Yeah, I'm curious. I think you make a great point about what we're gonna see when it comes to Sam Laity and how he's gonna sort of nail down an ideal starting 11. I think back to when he had to take over in the very brief interim with OL Reign as they fired Farid Ben Sidi and had plans to bring back Laura Harvey after her time with the United States Women's National Team in the Tokyo Games. So there's this window of time that he had to play head coach for this team. And it was a very curious time because this all Reign side had a lot of talent on their roster, but weren't exactly putting together or stringing together the results I think that fans anticipated or even the players that anticipated. And they were really kind of on the outside looking in. And then they really kind of turned things around under Sam Laity, kind of strung together some results. You get Laura Harvey back into the picture. They get into contention for the Shield at the end of 2021, make the playoffs, right? It's a very lovely story, although they didn't win a Shield or the championship, but good turnaround for them in terms of a tale of two halves of a season. So I'm very, very curious. I'm with you in terms of how is Sam Laity going to navigate an entire year with a team, from an off-season, preparation to preseason phase to running a table throughout the duration of a regular season, and kind of navigating some challenges early. I mean, we're talking about how there are some pretty significant season-ending injuries on this preseason roster. So in a sense, there are just some decisions that have already been made for the coaching staff. They are not going to have, Anika Creel available. They're not going to have, even in the midfield, they're not going to have Makame Gomera-Stevens available. They're not going to have Kelsey Hedge available. They're not going to have, Nichelle Prince available in the forward core that we've chatted a little bit about. So in a sense, they already know who they are going to be without, so maybe they're going to take a look at those areas and how they're going to iron them out.
Which I think helps at this point in the season.
Yeah,
it does.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if we're looking at those draft picks specifically and saying, one of these 4 draft picks are going to absolutely be the young prospect to get in there and force the franchise to give them a contract and say, hey, I'm going to make the impact for you. I think there's a lot of talent on this roster, even with some of the season-ended injuries that we're talking about. But we're still keeping an eye on Diana Ordonez, I think, in the young prospect category. The young prospect who's going to go in there and make an impact for this team, because she's just going to enter the sophomore phase of her career. And this is off of a ridiculous rookie campaign. So we're talking about setting a bar ridiculously high, a record-breaking bar for Diana Ordonez, because she broke the record for goal scoring by a rookie in NWSL last year in 2022.
11 goals from this player in 19 matches.
So what is that going to look like? How is that going to translate into year 2? We hear so often about the sophomore slump jinx, and what is that going to look like? Not only did they go out and make a trade and acquire this player, they renegotiated a contract. She will be in Houston for the next few years. They have plans to grow with and around this player. We want to see her keep up the goal scoring rate.
I do not want the sophomore slump to get her.
No.
I do not. I want so much for Diana Ordonez. I really do. This is also a roster and a team in which, despite all of the internationals they have, Mexico is, not going to the World Cup. And because of that, it allows for a relationship between someone like a Diana Ordonez and Maria Sanchez to really, really flourish.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that chemistry is going to be so crucial for this Houston side. I mean, Diana Ordonez is such a skilled player in that she can do so much of it herself, right? Getting into the box. But if you can get someone in the wings, in the flanks, sending crosses into the box, we saw Diana Ordonez getting up aerial presence, scoring header after header for North Carolina last year. And you know who crosses the ball? One of the best in the entire league? Maria Sanchez. Hello, I'm so excited about this. And I really just want so much for Diana Ordonez. I think that maybe she won't get that sophomore slump because she's at a new team, a new club. She's home, right? This is now Diana Ordonez's home. When North Carolina played in Houston last year, there was like a whole section for Ordonez. I think being under a Sam Laity is also going to help someone like an Ordonez. I want so much for this player. I really do. I really do. I think that this could be the year of Diana Ordonez if she makes it her year.
Well, I mean, look, the World Cup cycle will definitely provide some opportunities and some different looks for players over the course of the regular season. But that's why we also need to take a look at an experienced veteran that this team might pull from. And Houston Dash is a roster that has a number of veterans that they could sort of look to and kind of pull as an example, both on and off the pitch. I believe in our previous in last year's preview for Houston Dash, I think we went with Sophie Schmidt, right? This is someone who's been with the team a long time. So we were sort of looking at different areas, and we really think that responsibility is going to lie on somebody like a Katie Lind, formerly Katie Naughton, got married in the offseason. This is someone who has captained the team at times, and was an Iron Woman for them, playing every single minute. This is a player who is, once they went ahead and acquired her in the trade, has really just sort of elevated her profile in terms of her importance to this team. And I think for a little while there, this club was trying to figure out how they were going to get Katie Lind a stable and consistent center back partner, and they went out and they offered, they re-signed Ali Prysock to an extended contract as well. So there's some things working here in Houston's favor when it comes to this back line, and one of those things I think is absolutely leadership from Katie Lind.
I agree. I think the team's going to have to lean on her also in conjunction with a Jane Campbell in net. But I think it's going to be a great year for Katie Lind. I mean, she's been so consistent over the last couple of years, Lind. She really, really has. And with a lot of different moving parts in front of her coming in and out for the World Cup, which we're going to talk about, I think it's going to be crucial for Lind this year to solidify her spot, right? Even along the back line, if the roster right now has 13 or 12 defenders listed at this point, and if Naughton's the one consistent in the back line, I don't think she will. I think there'll be a few other consistencies. She has to be the one that really holds all the glue together. I'm excited for Lind in this year. I mean, she went on that playoff run with the team last year. There's just like a lot of different pieces that lead Lind to be one of the most experienced veterans on this team that's going to lead them.
Let's take a look at some players who may be absent during the World Cup stretch, which is why they're going to have to rely on somebody like a Caitlin. Houston Dash, no strangers to the World Cup cycle. They are one of 12 teams who will likely miss a number of players. No final rosters out yet for national teams, but there's a possibility that they could, be without their Canadians and Sophie Schmidt and Elisa Chapman. Ebony Salmon has been called into England national team camps, so she's still within the mix of the player bubble for England. Paulina Gramaglia, although someone who's bought out and on loan, likely to be absent with Argentina. Michelle Oze with Nigeria. Havana Salon could make a return with Jamaica in this World Cup. She was with them during their debut in 2019 and is likely to be absent with Jamaica once more in 2023. So once these final rosters drop, obviously we'll have a better idea or a better picture of who might go missing for Houston. But even just in hypotheticals, this is a lot of players.
This is a lot. This is a lot of players. It really is, right? Like Alozi, Schmidt, Salmon, Chapman. These are all really consistent players for Houston that they've lost, right? Most previously in other international cycles. But I think it's going to be difficult this year because of the lack of experience in the players that will step into those roles. Now, it does provide great opportunity, and we've seen some players come in and grab opportunity, take it, and say that this is mine. It's going to be impossible for others to get this role back. But I think that there could be a bit of a drop-off when we lose some of these internationals for Houston during the World Cup. Now, it's mostly the Challenge Cup that'll be played during this time. Most Challenge Cup games as the World Cup takes place from July 20th to August 20th. And of course, as these teams get knocked out of the World Cup run, they have the option to return to their clubs and continue playing. So it might not be as long as some other internationals that'll be going, but it'll still be pretty big and at an important, crucial part of the season. So Houston needs to rack up points at the start of the year with who they have.
Bless you, bud. Bless you.
Thank you. Excuse me.
The take was too much. The take was too much that you had to sneeze. You had to, it happens. It happens sometimes.
Live digital streaming.
I got you back. Don't even worry about it. Listen, I'm with you 100%. I'm looking at things like Challenge Cup.
Yeah.
I'm looking at things through like those stretches of time where maybe we will see some players who are likely to not get time, whether they're those draft picks or even just those depth players, get some time during those Challenge Cup moments. We're looking at, young player to make an impact or veteran player to draw from in terms of their experience and lean on. But I think number of players will likely fill those type of roles as well. You can look across the roster and see that. I mean, Marissa Vigiano is a player that we haven't talked about too much on this preview, and she is someone likely to have to step up a little bit in this 2023 season, especially in that midfield. That's going to be missing people. Maybe
I think Elizabeth Eddy too. You could throw her into that mix.
I think you can include her there as well. Yeah, another one of those players who's been around for a long time. Ryan Garris, someone who might get time during, those long stretches in light of, some of the rotations that we're going to see. So I'm very curious as to, how the coaching staff is going to navigate some of those absences, some of those stretches, whether they're Challenge Cup or regular season. But this roster is mostly intact from their 2022 quarterfinals finish. And we like the moves that they made in the offseason to try and boost their chances to go a little further. So I think that's the biggest question around this team going into 2023. It's not can they get to the postseason? We know that they can, but can they get there and go on a run? Can they win a postseason playoff match? And maybe that alludes to our projected finish for them in 2023. And I think it's safe to say we both agree that this is going to be a playoff team in 2023.
Yeah, this is for sure going to be a playoff team. You don't look at everything they did last year and how little has changed on the roster, how much they've gained. Literally, in a Diana Ordonez, one player can add so much. It's a winning coach coming into the program in Sandra Laity. They will make it back to the playoffs. I'm for sure about that. 4 to 7, right? I'll give them that 7 range, pushing for it at the end. But can they win in the postseason? That's going to be hard to do. I'm not sure they're going to host a game at the end of it all in the postseason, and that's hard to do on the road, especially like depending on the competition you're going up against. And this is a Houston side that went into the playoffs last year against a Kansas City, a really tough Kansas City team, and they end up losing 2-1 in that matchup. And Kansas City goes on to the final. So I think that Houston has more going for them this year. They're going to ride the wave of last year. Yes, I see it. Houston going to the postseason. Can they get that win? Can they get that win in the postseason and make it to the quarterfinals or make it to the semis? Just push on.
Getting chills. I'm excited. I'm ready for this regular season to pop off. And I know everybody is waiting for March 25th and opening weekend to come through. But that's all we've got for everyone today in terms of our previews. Thank you all so much for hanging in there and joining us in our team by team previews. But that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to Attacking Third. Download, follow, listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts. You can watch us too. Subscribe to us on YouTube to get alerts for whenever we go live at youtube.com/attacking third. And we'll be back with more team by team previews for the 2023 season. It kicks off on March 25th on Paramount Plus. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.